The direction that we give to our life basically depends upon the choices we make with the true intentions. I would like to focus on the word intentions here because we are humans and we are prone to make mistakes and we might not always make the right choices. Again, the word right and wrong is very subjective, but let's say subjectively, if we happen to make a wrong choice at any point in time, it is only and only our true intentions that will help us to redirect our lives. I will not be wrong if I say that at every point, we as humans undergo some struggles, some challenges to align our emotions with our relationships, with the social setups, with the finances, even with the political scenarios. But it is equally true that it is these challenges that help us to evolve as humans, as individuals, and as a civilization. I had these and many more thoughts in my mind before I decided to invite Swami Nikhileshwaranand for Hash Talks, which is also evolving as a human library podcast. Swami Nikhileshwaranand is the Adhyaksh of Rajkot branch of Ramakrishna Ashram, which is an affiliation to Ramakrishna mission started by Swami Vivekanand for over 100 years ago. He's a chemical engineer and he also pursued post-graduation in industrial engineering. And he also did management work as a management consultant for a very brief period of time before he decided to choose a different course in life. He extensively travels across the nation and across many countries to preach the universal message of Vedanta. He associates himself in lecturing various management, educational, and industrial institutions. And the main subject, the main focus of his lectures is the subject of life, happiness, and peace. And that exactly is the focus of this podcast. I'm Nazneen Kachwala, and I warmly welcome you all to this podcast. I'm so overwhelmed to have a man of this stature, this knowledge, as my guest for this podcast. Swamiji, I humbly welcome you, and I'm so thankful that you have given me this opportunity to have this conversation with you. I thank you from the depths of my heart.
Pleasure to meet you online.
So, Swamiji, as I some months back, I was just listening to one of the podcasts by Tom Bilyeu, who is one of my inspirations, through which I have got the idea of doing this digital content creation of podcasting. He was talking to a very young athlete named Nastya Lukin. Now, Nastya Lukin is, in her early 20s, she retired. She is like a five-time Olympic medalist. She has achieved so much at the early age of her life. And also, I heard Lara Datta once talking when she was having a conversation with Simi Garewal. She said that she had been won the title of Miss Universe, and she had traveled across the world. She had tasted all the delicacies available, and she had had all the worldly pleasures which a normal 23-year-old would not otherwise have. My question to you is that there is a widespread notion, a widespread understanding that one can dive deep into spiritual practices only after he or she has had all the worldly experiences, has had all the worldly pleasures. What is your take on this, sir?
Well, it will be like waiting for the ocean to be bereft of all the waves when I will take bath in the ocean. It will never be so. The waves will come and reside, waves will come and reside. There is no end to the ambition of material prosperity.
Right.
Even if you become the richest person of the world, you would like to maintain it next year next year, have more MSs. There is no limit to the wants of a person. So if you wait that I will start my spiritual practices only after I have done with it, it is never going to be done. In fact, spiritual education should be starting much earlier. A mother of a child of 5 years asked a great person, when should I start giving spiritual education to my child? He said, how old is the child? She said, 5 years. He said, you have come 5 years late to me because the spiritual education starts from day one. But that is a Western viewpoint. According to Indian scriptures, the spiritual education starts from -9 months. That is when the child is in the womb. And so far we were thinking the stories of Abhimanyu and all were fictitious. But now the modern science has revealed that the development of the brain and the faculties start inside the womb. And that is how the government of Gujarat has started Children's University to train the pregnant mothers. They have made Tapovan, where these pregnant mothers are given special type of education, special type of facilities, so that even from the not right from the birth, but before the birth, the child comes into contact with spiritual knowledge, and that is how the humanity will evolve. And IQ, EQ, and SQ, all the three components are required for the fulfillment of for the total development of a human being. And so wait for the old age to come when all the things have gone, at that time to acquire SQ is very, very difficult, much more difficult than when you are young. It is always possible to mold from the clay which is wet and which is not yet hardened. After it is hardened and baked in fire, very difficult to give a shape to that. So spirituality, spiritual education, spirituality should start as early as possible. But that does not mean that we neglect the other part, that is our material achievements, the material prosperity, the worldly achievements. Both can go hand in hand. Only thing is that we have somehow wrong notion of spirituality, that spirituality and material prosperity, spirituality and worldly achievements, these are north and south pole. It is not so. Both are not contradictory, both are complementary, and not only that, they both are essential part of a spiritual life. So unless until we clarify what exactly is spirituality, we will not be able to understand this subject. What is spirituality? Spirituality is not just sitting down in meditation or only praying. See, spirituality is not going to a forest or a cave. Spirituality is a matter of inner growth, and that can be practiced in the marketplace, that can be practiced even in the malls, in the shops, in the factories, in the industries, wherever you are working, when you are working. This is a unique contribution of Swami Vivekananda. We had forgotten that message of practical Vedanta, which is already available in our scriptures in India. But somehow or the other, we give more importance to the reality which is beyond time, space, and causation. But we forgot that the same reality is immanent also. Parabrahma, Apar Brahma. Parabrahma is transcendental reality. Apar Brahma is immanent reality. So Swami Vivekananda said, we forgot to give the equal importance to immanent reality. ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत्किंच जगत्याम जगत तेन तक्तेन भुंजी था ma grida kasasiddhanam. That supreme reality is permeating the whole universe. What now the modern quantum mechanics says has been already told thousands of years back in our Upanishad. Ishavasya Upanishad is one of the oldest Upanishads, where it says, Ishavasramidam sarvam, yatkincha jagatyam jagat. It is permeating the whole universe, this reality. So, then what follows? So, tena tyaktena bhunjitha. So, enjoy the word. How? By renouncing. My God, if I renounce my Mercedes-Benz car, how am I going to enjoy? You did not give up your Mercedes-Benz car or your house or your clothes. No, you have to give up your selfish ego, your attachment. Spirituality does not mean giving up the comforts. Spirituality means giving up the attachment to the comforts. So giving up the attachment to the I, the selfish I, the selfish gene, which has to be evolved. A human being is evolved to an extent where he has transcended his selfish ego. So when we take in these terms, this spiritual development is only in business of the inner world. It's got nothing to do whether you are sitting in a shop or you are sitting in a cave. That doesn't matter. What we have to do, we have to see is that inner development. And so when Swami Vivekananda says, Sister Nivedita asked this question, that I heard that Buddhism says that, you know about Sister Nivedita, Miss Margaret Noble, she dedicated her whole life for educating Indian women as per the call of Swami Vivekananda in 1898. She came to India. So she asked this question, is it true that Hinduism says that only one is real and the many unreal? And Buddhism says that many real and the one unreal? Swami Vivekananda says yes. Ekam Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. One, Brahma is real. Jagat Mithya, the universe is unreal. Buddhism says no, there is nothing called Atman. The world is real. So Swami Vivekananda says what you said is very true. And I and Sri Ramakrishna have come to add that one and many are the same reality, seen from different angles with different perspectives. It is not two. It's a holistic universe. The Bell's theorem says that all the particles of the whole universe are interconnected at deeper level. And David Bohm, a Nobel Prize physicist, has experimentally verified it. So that is why Erwin Schrödinger, another Nobel Prize physicist, says consciousness is a singular of which the plural is unknown. It is one consciousness permeating the whole universe. What follows? That if I hate you, if I give you suffering, I will get suffering because I and you are not same. You are not different. This is the Advaita philosophy. But Swami Vivekananda says we just went on for theoretical things, but we have to make Vedanta practical. So what is practical Vedanta? Practical Vedanta is to see the same reality is multiple universe. So Sister Nivedita says this is the realization which makes Vivekananda the great preacher of karma. He says this in the introduction to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda in 9 volumes. As you know, Swami Vivekananda's all lectures, his conversations, his poems, his letters, all have been compiled into 9 volumes named The Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda. Sister Nivedita writes in her introduction, beautiful introduction, that this is the realization which makes Vivekananda the great preacher of karma, not as diverse from, but as expressing Gyan and Bhakti. To him, the workshop, the farmyard, the laboratory are as true and fit scenes for meeting God with man as the door of his temple, or the door of a temple, or the cell of a monk. Why? Because it is only one reality. So not only all modes of work, but all modes of worship, but all modes of work also becomes worship. To work is to worship. To labor is to pray. To renounce is to conquer. This practical Vedanta, this Karma Yoga, Swami Vivekananda says, for the modern man, this is very important because the life is becoming more and more complex, more and more demanding. And so when we are compelled to work for our livelihood, when we are compelled to work for our achievements, worldly achievements, material prosperity, it is at this time, this practical Vedanta will help that yes, what we don't have to give up anything. What we have to give up is the attachment. Attachment to the inner selfish I, selfishness, attachment. This is what we have to give up and remain in the world. So Swami Vivekananda says in his book in Karma Yoga, a king may be living in a palace, sitting on the golden throne, and yet he might be unattached and might be a very spiritual person. At the same time, another thing, a beggar not having anything to eat or anything, but must maybe very much attached to the world. So attachment or spirituality is not dependent on the external things. So now we come to the point. It's a very vast subject, so I now come to the point that what the question that is, that material prosperity is not in contradictory to spiritual development because it's an inner thing. So that is why Dana Zohar says in her book, SQ, Spiritual Intelligence, the Ultimate Intelligence, where she says neurologically, physiologically, biologically, psychologically, from every point of view, now there is concluding evidence. There is something called SQ, which is the basis of both IQ and EQ. IQ will tell you how to play the game of life. EQ will tell you how to play the game of life under changed circumstances with changed strategies. And SQ will tell you why to play the game of life. What is the purpose of life? Why we are here on this earth? What we want to achieve so that we don't have any regrets at the time of death? The fundamental question that is going beyond the boundaries. This is IQ will tell you how to play better, but EQ will tell you how to play better under changed circumstances. But still, it is within the boundaries. How to excel within the boundaries. But SQ is like going beyond the boundaries. So this SQ will give you happiness and peace, long-term happiness and long-term peace. Not only long-term success, but long-term happiness and peace. But IQ and EQ can go a certain extent. But if you want fulfillment of life, complete fulfillment, then you have to have SQ. So IQ plus EQ plus SQ is equal to total development, total human development. That is the equation I give to the youngsters. This SQ, and Swami and Dana Zohar gives a beautiful story, just a small example. By the side of the Mexican coast was a management consultant who was sitting there. And he saw a little distance, a fisherman was sleeping in his boat, and it was afternoon. So that management can say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you not fishing? It is still afternoon. Just in reclined mode, he said, sir, you saw what happened in the morning, got a big catch. I sold it. I got a lot of money, and that is enough for my today's livelihood. So my quota is over, so I am enjoying. What? Is there any quota system here? You must fish more and get more money. But what I do with the extra money? I have got enough for today. Why? You must deposit. Deposit, you never heard the word deposit. Yes, open a bank account and deposit. Then go on depositing. Then when you got enough, you purchase another boat. Then you have more fishes and more money. What I do with that money? Again, deposit. Again, have another. So likewise, go on getting more and more boats, fleet of boats. Then you will become CEO of a multinational company. Then move your headquarters from Mexico to New York. Expand your business. Go all over the world and expand your business. Then Then because you will go all over the world, so naturally there will be bypass surgery, there will be blood pressure. So when the doctor says 3 bypass surgery is over now, no more, so you retire and then sell the company. Come to me. I am an investment expert from Harvard. I will tell you where to invest, how to invest, and you will get such nice income every month. You will be able to sleep nicely. I was sleeping nicely. It is you who woke me up.
Right.
So Dana Zohar says such a roundabout process for getting happiness and peace. She says this management expert has got more IQ. He knows how to make money, but this fisherman has got low IQ. But this fisherman has got high SQ. He knows the purpose of life is to have happiness and peace. But that management expert does not know he has got low SQ. But that does not mean we should not go for higher income. No, this is just an example.
Right.
We should not take example in totality. That does not mean that management consultant was wrong. We should go for more money. We should go for better career development. No doubt about it. But we must know where lies the true happiness and peace. First 50 years of life, just spoiling your health for getting wealth. Next 50 years of life, spoiling that wealth for getting health, which does not come.
Right.
Is not wisdom.
Right. Makes a lot of sense.
So that is why now how to develop SQ, that is where Swami Vivekananda says that Vedanta can help, the yogas can help, 4 yogas, Raj Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. If we combine these 4 yogas in daily life, then we will be having higher and higher SQ. And the more SQ we have, the more we will be able to grapple with all the problems in life. All the problems will come because life means problems. Life means struggle. And when there is no struggle, there is no life.
Right.
A dead person hasn't got any struggle. He's dead. He hasn't got any struggle. As long as you're alive, you will have some struggle or the other. And Swami Vivekananda gives the equation. The greater the struggle, the greater is a person who comes out of it. If you want to become extraordinary, you have to undergo extraordinary struggle. If you want to become ordinary, you will be having ordinary struggle. You decide whether you want to become ordinary, extraordinary. But you have to pay the price.
Right.
Maharaja Ajit Singh Ji of Khetri, Maharaja of Khetri was Swami Vivekananda's disciple. So one day he suddenly asked, Maharaja, what is life? Swami Vivekananda immediately replied, my dear prince, life is nothing but the struggle of a being under the circumstances, trying to press it down.
Right.
That is life. That is life. Life is struggle. When there is no struggle, there is death. Even a small insect is crawling on the railway track. The railway track is such a big engine, but is inert. But the small worm trying to save itself from the jaws, from the wheels of the engine and trying to escape. Yes, it is struggling. This is life. This is the difference between life and inertness and the lively thing.
Right.
Living and inert. The worm is living, so it is struggling to escape from the wheels. Train doesn't have any such decision making. The engine driver knows how to do it. So that is why, coming to the main point to your question, is that material prosperity and true spirituality and true material prosperity. True means tena taktena bhunji tha magrita kasya. Enjoy the world. How? By renouncing the attachment to it. And that is the seed of trusteeship management. This found trusteeship management, which now we call CSR, corporate social responsibility, is very nice that the government made it compulsory, because we had been preaching it, but nobody was taking it. Now they are taking it. Of course, they have got ways how to avoid it, but at least some percentage, some way, somehow the other, it is coming to a certain. But this trusteeship management will give them the true peace of mind. More importantly, not only for balancing the have-nots and haves. There's a big gap. For bridging that gap, this trusteeship management principle is very important.
Right.
But more important than that, it gives you peace of mind. That is more, that is where it is more important.
Right.
John
Uh,
D. Rockefeller,
hmm.
the richest person of the world, when Swami Vivekananda went to America, at that time he was passing through a very bad phase. As you know, 1893 was a very bad year for petroleum industry. In fact, for all the industries, but a big economic slowdown, economic slump. And then Rockefeller, at that young age, became very, very uh, old. He became bald, all hair gone, and he became emaciated. He could not sleep for days together, and he was at the point of breaking down. At that time, somebody suggested, why not you go to an Indian yogi who has come and get his advice so that you can get peace of mind. Rockefeller was very much agitated. What? I have to go to a beggar to get piece of advice? Piece of advice? I will not go. You know, we are all beggars because we live on charity. We are bhiksha. We live on bhiksha. We live on alms. We live on charity. We are monks. Swami Vivekananda was a monk. He said, what, to go to a beggar for getting advice? I will not go. And he did not go. One fine morning, suddenly he came to the place of Swami Vivekananda, where he was staying, and he called the bell. The butler opened the door. Now, it so happened that Swamiji was not in his drawing room. He was in his study room. So without being announced, he entered the study room. Swamiji was at that time reading a book. As you know, Swamiji had tremendous power of concentration of mind. So he was so much absorbed that he did not notice Rockefeller coming. Rockefeller stood for some time. Then he knocked at the table. Then Swamiji looked up. Then Rockefeller, I am Rockefeller. Swamiji asked, what do you want? You were not prepared for this statement. Rockefeller is the president of America, would get up. And here is the beggar sitting in his chair and is asking, what do you want? I said, I don't want anything. So why have you come? Now he had no answer. Then Swami said, Rockefeller, I know why you come. You come here because you do not have peace of mind. And then he started narrating many incidents from the life of Rockefeller, which no one else knew except Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Then he became very much agitated. What? Yeah, he has come to know all my secrets. And so how do you know about all these things? Who has told you? Swamiji smiled saying, do you think it is necessary? I can see through your mind as I can see through a glass mirror. Then he was very much nonplussed. Then Swami Vivekananda said, my dear Rockefeller, I'll give you a piece of advice. Remember, you are not the owner of your wealth. You are the custodian of your wealth. Utilize this money for reviewing the sufferings of millions of people. Immediately you will get peace of mind. There is no other way by which you can get peace of mind. Rockefeller became very much angry and he just left abruptly as abruptly had come. But after a few days again he came. Similar fashion, called the bell, the butler opened the door, he went inside. Swamiji was not in his drawing room, so went inside without being announced to the study room. Swamiji was fully absorbed. Again, he knocked at the table, then Swamiji looked up, and then Rockefeller put a piece of paper in which he had made an announcement of a very huge donation for a public cause. So now, you must thank me, I followed your advice. Swamiji said, well, it is for you to thank me. Because by following my advice, you will get peace of mind, which cannot be purchased by millions of dollars. Rockefeller had already given donation. If you go through the life of Rockefeller, you will find that he had been giving donation, but this was a very huge donation. We do not know what it was, but it was a very huge donation for a public cause. It may be he had already started donating for the University of Chicago. When I went to Chicago, I went to the Rockefeller, this Chicago University. There, they have made, they have a statue of Rockefeller in that campus as the person who donated maximum for the Chicago University. So maybe that might be the thing, but this is just an assumption. Whatever it is, the outcome is that the trusteeship management principle not only bridges the gap between haves and have-nots as the external world, lot of difference. On one hand, 20% below, 20% below poverty line, having no second meal, and on the other percent, 5% suffering from not only consumerism but also affluenza. So that is the gap. So this will bridge the gap. But more importantly, the person who practices it will have peace of mind, which is very important. So many people committing suicide, but particularly among the affluent people, we can understand those who are poor, hungry, do not have food, no clothes. We can understand. The percentage of suicide in them is less.
Yeah.
But percentage of suicide in the so-called developed countries is more. So what does it mean? H is not directly proportional to M, which we thought. H is directly proportional to M, where H is equal to happiness and M is equal to money. More money, more happiness. This every youngster has got this equation in mind. Money, money, money. सबसे बड़ा रुपया बाबा, सबसे बड़ा रुपया. But had it been so, then so many suicides would not be happening. So many cases of schizophrenia would not be happening in the so-called developed countries. But whatever it is, what we want is material prosperity, but not at the cost of happiness and peace. We must remember. We must give priority to happiness and peace, and at the same time, we must give priority to money. Both are complementary to each other. It is not that just by becoming a beggar you will become happy. No.
Right.
And it is not also that just because you have got a Dunlop pillow you will be able to get sleep. No. That is no guarantee. Mental peace is more important. And so spiritual development and material prosperity can go hand in hand. Now this is because all your questions are that will come, I know. Basically this matter has to be understood properly. Then other concepts will become clear.
Correct. Right. Swamiji, as you were talking, you said that when one person, when he is molded, after that it becomes very difficult to remold him and for him to get into the spiritual practices. You mentioned earlier when you started explaining this whole concept. I want to ask that to be a spiritual person, is it necessary for someone to believe in God? Can an atheist be spiritual?
Not at all. Not at all. Dana Zohar very rightly said that development of SQ has got nothing to do with religion. One may be very religious person and still having very low SQ. Another person may be having high SQ and yet may not be believing in a religion or God. These two are not dependent on each other. In fact, sometimes we find the reverse thing. Those who have got high SQ, they do not believe in God, but they believe in charity, they believe in helping others, they believe seeing God in others, and they are very helpful to others. At the same time, Swami Vivekananda gives the extreme statement. No saint has given such an extreme statement. What he says, that a person, even if a person has not read any religious book on the earth, even if he has not visited any temple, church, or a mosque or any gurudwara in his whole life, and if he has not had any sort of religious sentiment in him, but if the simple power of good actions has brought him to the point where he is ready to sacrifice his life for serving the others, he is the most spiritual person in the world. Most spiritual. So this is the extreme. That does not mean we should not believe in God. That does not mean we should not believe in scriptures. No, if it helps you to develop spirituality, well and good, very nice. But you see, that does not mean that we should go out to the malls rather than going to temples. I am not advocating that.
Correct.
What I mean to say is that atmosphere is also very important. Then why do you build temples? Why do you go to temples? Because that helps us. That spiritual atmosphere helps us to develop that spirituality inside. But if it does not if it does not have any change in your inner conscience, then it is of no use. Sometimes your ego is puffed up. Oh, I made so much charity. Or I went so many times to the temple. I am better than you. You are not going to temple or a mosque or a church. If that feeling of superiority comes, the ego comes, spirituality is gone. Because selfish ego is the main obstacle, stumbling block for achieving our inner growth. So that is why we have to be very, very clear what is real spirituality. That is number one. And then we have to be, once we are clear about it, then this confusion that just because somebody is going to God, going to temple, he may have a higher spirituality or higher SQ. No, not necessarily so. There is a little more possibility. A person who is going to a mall or spending his time in mall, and another person is spending his time in temple, the second person will have a better chance of developing SQ. There is no doubt about it, but not necessarily so, because
Okay.
it is a question of inner development.
Right.
So attitude is what counts. The attitude is what counts. Your
Right.
your urge, that is what counts.
Swamiji, in my introduction, I said that, defining what is right and what is wrong is very subjective. Now, how does an individual decide that he or she is in the right direction? Because what is right for me might not be right for the other person. So, how can somebody be decisive and decisive in a way that he is working for an overall good?
Yeah. So now the thing is that this right and wrong, who will decide that? You know, you must remember again the fundamental point. A decision is right if it takes you to your goal. A decision is wrong if it takes you away from your goal. So the first important thing is, where do you want to reach? Where do you want to go? Supposing you take a very nice decision, okay, I want to go someplace, I want to go travel, then best possible car I take, best possible road I take, having minimum of stumbling blocks, minimum of road breakers, the more of facilities on that road. You can go high speed, no speed breakers, and also beautiful road. You took a very right decision, but you went to the opposite direction.
Right.
So you thought you had taken a very right decision from all points of view, but the real point you missed. The driver was not informed where do you want to go. So he went the best possible road there, and in the quickest time you reached also, but you reached the wrong place because you went in the wrong direction. So the decision was wrong ultimately. Why? Because you did not reach the goal. So the first thing that you have to define is, where do you want to reach? Any decision, whether right or wrong, will depend upon whether it is taking you to your goal. Unfortunately, most of the people do not have any goal also in life. They do not know where they want to go, what they want to achieve in life. It is going just like flock of sheep. Everybody is just like a flock of sheep, one after the another, one after another, never thinking what is the purpose of life, why we here on this earth, what do I want to achieve before I die. No, nobody. I asked so many youngsters. He said, वो इतना सोचने का टाइम कहाँ है, बढ़ने के समय सोचेंगे, पर उसके बाद में it is too late. After death, you can't think anything.
But Swamiji, goals also evolve, right? So if I have a goal today, my goal will definitely evolve after some point in time.
Surely. Now you see, there are three types of goals.
Yeah.
One is a short-term goal, one is a long-term goal, third is the ultimate goal. Ultimate goal for every human being is to reach a state where you reach the ultimate. That is nothing more to be achieved. Infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite existence. If you reach that stage, that is the ultimate stage. That everybody has to reach, every human being. And every human being has got that special prerogative of reaching to that stage. This is why Dr. Einstein says in his book, The World as I See It, that the true value of a human being is determined primarily by the measure and the sense in which he is attained to liberation from the self. The true value of a human being is dependent on on how much he has evolved to that extent. The true value of a human being is determined primarily by the measure and the sense in which he has attained to liberation from the self. The World as I See It, very small book by Dr. Einstein. So that is why, and also this is a special prerogative of every human being. Out of 86,000, out of um, 84 lakhs of species, 84 lakhs, 8.4 million species. Only human beings can have spiritual development. This is the old Indian scripture said. But the modern science is no. Modern science is no. There are 12.5 million species, 125 lakhs of species. Difference is not much. But they also say, Dana Zohar also says that IQ is available with all the species, including the computers. EQ is available only with a few species, but SQ is available only with the human beings. Human beings have got a special prerogative of knowing your own self. So you can go beyond. A human being can transcend himself and perceive himself in the act of perception. You can go beyond the limitations, go beyond all the limitations and perceive yourself in the act of perception. That is, a human being has got the special prerogative of a human being. Now, you are not, at present, we are not making use of that special prerogative. What we are doing is, the animals are eating, we are also eating. The animals are sleeping, we are also sleeping. Animals are having mating, we are also mating. And then they are dying, we are dying. That's all. Absolutely no difference. We are living animal life at present. Most of the human beings. We have never thought that how different we are. Ahar nidra bhay menthunancha samanametat pashubi naranam dharmo hi tesham adhiko visheshah dharmena hina pashubi samana. Without this spiritual knowledge, there is absolutely no difference between human beings and animals. However evolved you may think yourself, a little more better food, that's all. An animal may not be going to a Pizza Hut, that's all.
Yeah.
But after all, it's only eating, drinking, and sleeping and dying. A little better and better animal. An animal with 2 legs. So that is why they are important.
Yeah.
What was your point? What I was trying to that one? That is special prerogative of a human being is to go beyond.
Yeah.
So this
the
is
goals.
what.
If my goals evolve,
that is the goal of a human being. The ultimate goal of a human being is to go beyond all the boundaries, and that is a special prerogative of human beings.
Yeah.
So that is Teilhard de Chardin also says, he asked this book, The Phenomenon of Man. He was a botanist, but he was a Christian father, but his books were not being allowed to publish, but posthumously they have been published. One of the books is The Phenomenon of Man. What is the difference between a man and animal? Somebody say intelligence. He said not necessarily so.
Yeah.
Because you hide your milk, you are hiding your milk in a kitchen and the cat takes it away. So next day you hide your milk in some other corner, and the cat takes it away. So who is more intelligent?
Yeah.
So then what is the difference between man and animal? Then he says, very beautiful, he says, while a man knows what he knows, an animal does not know what it knows. A man knows what he knows, but animal does not know what it knows. And man can know himself. Who am I and what I want to achieve? But animal does not do about it. That my purpose of life is to evolve to a certain extent that I am not affected by the external situation. This type, and I have to reach a point where I get infinite existence, infinite knowledge, infinite this. This type of thought can come only to human beings. This is a special prerogative of human beings.
Right. The awareness, the state of awareness that we have.
State of awareness.
Yes. Swamiji, do you believe that a person who is more intelligent or a person who has more knowledge is the one who suffers the most?
Very nice question. The thing is that our nerves become more and more, the more we intelligent, the more evolved we are. Our nerves become more and more sensitive, you know. That's why you feel that. Supposing there is a savage who is not learned, or he is living in the forest, or he's just not a learned person. If you give him some scolding, he doesn't mind. He pockets that insult very easily. But a person, supposing he is a graduate, he will feel bad. If he's a postgraduate, he will feel much more. If he's a doctor, PhD, then for 10 days he will not have sleep. This is what he told about me. What? He told about me. So his ego is more puffed up, number one. That is where the injury comes. The ego is also crash. And so not necessarily that every intelligent person will have. This is only restricted to IQ people. But
Yeah.
those who have got EQ and
Hmm.
SQ, they will be able to absorb that shock very easily,
Hmm.
relatively. But
Hmm.
those who are only going for IQ will have what you are saying, will feel it more
Hmm.
than the persons. So
Okay.
the idea is not to go to the animal level where we are not affected by the things. There is a level where you are animal, you are not affected. There is a level
Hmm.
you are affected, that is human being. But when you become superhuman, then
Hmm.
again you become not, you are not affected. You are like a Sthita Pragya.
Hmm. Hmm.
You are so much evolved that these small things do not matter to you.
Hmm. Just talking of evolving and talking of being not affected by any external means. Uh, so we undergo so much. We are affected by so many emotions that we face in our regular life. I just want to know how there can be madness in love without any bondage.
How they can be?
How
May,
you can be, exactly, you can be mad in love. I'm not talking about romantic relationships, but love in the sense how I can with my fellow humans, how I operate, how I interact with my fellow humans in my relationships, with no bondage, without having any emotional attachments, how I can be free, how, in short, how can I move one step forward to becoming a superhuman, as you just mentioned.
very true, very true. You know, there's a beautiful book, Religion of Love by Swami Vivekananda, where he says, there cannot be an infinite love or an immortal love between two mortals dying each moment, going towards death every moment, and their moods also changing all the time. There cannot be an immortal love between two mortals
Hmm.
going towards death and their moods also changing all the time. So there can be an infinite love between infinite reality, between infinite Atman and infinite Paramatman. And that is called Bhakti Yoga. That is called Bhakti Yoga. That is loving the Lord thy God with all thy strength, with all thy mind, with all thy heart. And that is really religion. And that is really spirituality. So that divine love with the divine is the real love. And that divine, but that does it mean that we should not love our fellow beings? No. We have to gradually evolve that human love into divine love. Trying to see the divine in the human beings, trying to see that same divine divinity in human beings in everyday life. It is a matter of evolution. It will
Hmm.
not come in a day. It is a sort of a practice, a spiritual practice. And the more you are within yourself, the more you are drawn inside, the more you are inward, the more you are with, you are undisturbed by the external stimuli, the more you will be able to love, able to see the divine. The more you are able to see divine in yourself, the more you will be able to see the divine in others. And the more you are able to see divine in others, gradually that human relationship or human bondage or human relationship, human love will be transformed into divine love.
Hmm.
It's a great, it's a long process. It's a long process.
Yeah.
It's not one day job.
Right. Okay. Um, uh, so in your answers, you talked, you mentioned a lot of physicists and you mentioned a lot of scientists. With my little knowledge of astrophysics or science, I believe that the universal design is chaotic, right? But when we try to align ourselves with peace, with divinity, or with one thing, are we not acting against the nature?
Well, the purpose of human life is to go against the nature, both external and internal. That is the purpose of human life. Otherwise, what is the difference between animals and human beings? Any animals do not react, do not oppose the nature.
Hmm.
We oppose.
Hmm.
The nature says, "Go, this is cold, and you must live in cold." Human beings says, "No, I will invent an air conditioner. I will invent a heater. Go, This is temperature high. You must live in heat. No, I'll invent an air conditioner. So we want to control the nature, both external and internal. When we conquer the external nature, that is science. When we conquer the internal nature, that is spirituality. That is how both are complementary. Both are trying to control the nature. Both are trying to conquer the nature. Both are trying to oppose the nature. That is real humanity, not in conformity with the nature. Then you become human beings. So this has to be understood. So Swami Vivekananda says each soul is potentially divine. The goal of human life is to manifest this divinity within. How? By controlling the nature external and internal. External nature means the senses, internal nature, our mind and the other things. So the conquest of both external and internal nature is important. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal of human life is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines, dogmas, rituals, temples, churches, mosques are but secondary details. Not that they are not important, but they are secondary. The primary is how much you have manifested your divinity within. That is the thing. That is real spirituality.
And what is better, Swamiji? Like, working for our own liberation or working for the liberation of others?
Well, beautiful question. So here, those who are who are only going for their own liberation are selfish people to a certain extent. And those who are going for liberating others have missed the goal.
Right.
So what is required is combination of both. So Swami Vivekananda gave a beautiful equation, a beautiful mandate. What is the mandate? Atmano mokshartham jagad hitaya cha. And all the followers of Ramakrishna mission, Ramakrishna order, whether they are monk or monastics or lay people, the idea is Atmano mokshartham jagad hitaya cha. So anybody who wants to become a monk, they come and they say, my idea is Atmano mokshartham. I said, go away. Go to Himalaya. There are so many hermits, not place for you. Some people come to me, I want to serve society. I said, go to Vivekananda Kendra or so many other organizations there doing social service. But if you want to realize the self, Atmano mokshartham, while serving the human beings, irrespective of caste, creed, color, religion, nationality, looking upon them as divine. So we are not doing any social service, Ramakrishna Mission. What we are trying to do, we are trying to perform our spiritual practices. So spiritual practices consist of Raj Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and most important for the modern age, Karma Yoga, that is serving others. So service to others is not in contradiction with the self-realization. You have to understand that. So when I am serving others, but of course the attitude is important. When I am serving others, I'm trying to help others, just throwing a coin to a beggar. That is not service. But looking upon every beggar also, even any person who are serving, as the manifestation of the same divinity. So Swami Vivekananda says, you have heard the mantras, Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Atithi Devo Bhava. I am giving you some additional mantras for the modern age. What are that? Daridra Devo Bhava, Rogi Devo Bhava. There is God within human beings, within the poor also. There is God within the sick people. So we are not trying to serve the sick people. We are trying to worship the reality, a supreme reality which is embedded in the sick people by giving him medicine. When we are worshipping in the temple, we are giving some offering to God. Here also we are giving some offering to God. But here, instead of offering the sweet or fruit, we are giving medicine. Because Rogi Nayan needs it. So Daridra Nayan, we give sweet. We give food. So the worship depends upon what type of God you are serving. So Daridra Nayan, Rogi Nayan, these are your gods. So that is why, so if you take that Jagadhitaya in that sense, then it is complementary to Atmana Moksha, because it's a part of Karma Yoga, and Karma Yoga is a part of our spiritual practice for getting the Atmana Mokshartham, not complementary. Not only that, then a stage comes when you realize the self. Then also, the real people, the real saints, they are not satisfied with Atmana Mokshartham. Now they utilize this self, this knowledge for liberating others. That is the highest type of service they are doing. Highest type of service. Liberating others from the worldly bondage. So we are serving others as a part of our sadhana till we get realized, till we get liberation. And after liberation also, we continue to work as Swami Vivekananda was made to work. Swami Vivekananda says, I want to always be absorbed in samadhi state. Sri Ramakrishna, his Guru, said, what? You are talking like a fool? You have to distribute your fruits of your sadhana to the whole of humanity. The whole of humanity demands it. I said, I am not going to work. I want to remain in bliss, immersed in my infinite bliss in samadhi. No, you will have to work. You have to work. And he had to work. Swami Vivekananda had to work.
Swamish, after listening to you, I would be, I'm feeling very overwhelmed. And I was just thinking whether one life is enough for me to attain this spiritual stage that you have been explaining to me so far. I mean, I just want to know, how can somebody start with the spiritual practices, or what are the stages of spiritual practices in the, let's say, in the Advaita philosophy?
Well, you don't have, first of all, you don't have to believe in any God. If you want to believe God, welcome. Even if you don't believe in God. So Swami Vivekananda says, the old religion said he is an atheist who does not believe in God. The new religion says he is an atheist who does not believe in himself. So believe in yourself. Inner yourself. There is an infinite reality within. And there is an infinite power embedded inside. It is there already, but it has to be manifested. The divinity has to be manifested. What is the proof? What is the proof that there is Atman? The Kathopanishad says, Esha sarveshu bhuteshu gudo atmana prakashate drishyate tvagraya buddhya sukshmaya sukshmadarshibhi. Inside every human being, there is a center of consciousness called Atman, having infinite power, but it is hidden. When it is hidden, how do I believe? Because it's not visible. What is the documented evidence? Drishyate. Some people have seen it. Some people have felt it. Some people have realized it. Who have realized? Drishyate tvagraya buddhya sukshmaya sukshmadarshibhi. Those who have got fine intellect, display different type of intellect, SQ, they have realized it. That is the proof. You also can do it. This is what Sri Ramakrishna told. Some can say, I don't believe in God. Have you seen God? He used to ask everybody. Nobody could reply. But Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, I have seen God. I am seeing him more intensely than I am seeing you. You also can see him, but you have to come to the laboratory of spiritual practices. And Swami Vivekananda accepted it. He accepted that challenge, and then he had that realization in the Kashipur Garden House. He was hardly 25 years at that time when he had the realization of the supreme reality permitting the whole world. He had the samadhi, lyrical samadhi in Kashipur Garden. And because he had the realization, he had the realization of the supreme reality. That is why he could declare in the parliament of words religions the words of the shloka from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Shunvantu vishve amritasya putra aye dhamani divyani tastuhu vedahametam purusham mahantam aditavarnam tamasa parastat tameva viditva timritameti nanya pantha vidyatayana. I have found the ancient one who is beyond all miseries. By knowing him alone, he shall be free from miseries. I have seen that ultimate reality. That is what Swami Vivekananda said in that parliament of religions, quoting the rishis. And then he said, let me tell you, my brothers and sisters of America, by this sweet name, Amritasya Putra, ye the children of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings, ye divinities and sinners, it is a sin to call a man so. It is a standing liable on human nature. Come up, O lions, and shake up the delusion that you are sheep. Your soul's immortal, spirit's free. blessed and eternal. You're not matter, you're not bodies. Matter is a servant, not ye the servant of matter. This is the message of Vedanta which Swami Vivekananda delivered. First, he realized himself. He had seen that Atman, and then he said, yes, I have seen. Sri Ramakrishna told him, and he then realized, and then he told the humanity, yes, everyone can realize that Atman. But we have to follow the spiritual practices in the form of 4 yogas. But we can start from where we are, and it is open to all. Every human being, irrespective of caste, creed, color, religion, nationality, can follow these 4 yogas in daily life without changing his job, without changing his environment, without changing his house, without giving up his clothes. Wherever you are, you can practice this spirituality, advance in development. What happens? Then the external nature, external circumstances, the external problems, the external human beings will not be able to disturb you. You will have more and more power to face the struggles of life. That is the beauty of it. And that infinite nature gradually will be realized. The more that inner power is roused, more and more you will be advancing in spirituality. More and more you will be able to get happiness and peace. More and more you will be able to tackle the challenges of life, external circumstances, and evolve.
Um, Swami Vivekananda was, as you were quoting him, I just happened to recall that Swami Vivekananda was very critical about the factor that there is, jealousy in human beings about one another. Where we intend to be jealous of others' achievements, others, what other people have had in their lives. What I perceive is that, so jealousy probably can be termed, according to me, as not so negative emotion, because if I can use that feeling to attain what I want to, then I am progressing one step ahead. I mean, I just want to know, is it right to put the word jealousy in a negative context always?
Yes, it is a negative, always a negative emotion. Jealousy is very, very bad, very bad. First of all, it burns you, then it burns the other person. You see, and why, when do you find jealous? When you compare yourself with others, then only jealousy comes. So never compare yourself with others. Compare yourself with yourself of yesterday. And advance, 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 advance. Go forward, go forward, go forward. That is the equation. Are you better than yesterday? That is more important than self and how to pull the leg of that person and how to backbite and all those negative things after comes. Your happiness is gone. Then you become more and more negative. The negative emotions come. So all these things come. So jealousy has always to be, what jealousy comes of itself. That's the problem. The problem is that it comes without invitation. So what is to be done? How to tackle the jealousy? So number one, don't compare yourself with others. Compare yourself with yourself of yesterday and evolve. And when these feelings come, do not let it overpower you. He said, he may be right in his own place. He is great in his own way. I am great on my own way. Every person is great in his or her own way. Every person is unique. Every person has a unique thumb, and every person has got unique abilities. No use comparing yourself with others. That person may be cooking very much better than you, but you are playing much better than her. So never compare. Everybody is unique. Unique eye has to be evolved.
But Swamiji, what about competitiveness in that case? Because if I see one person who I feel that, okay, he or she has got particular strengths and skills, which even I want to develop, and I can learn from that person, and then maybe I can compete with him. Okay, jealousy could be a negative term. It could be, because that is a general perception.
No,
But if I
healthy
go,
competition is good. Healthy competition is good, no doubt. But the unhealthy competition should be avoided. Unhealthy competition, when the jealousy is there, is unhealthy. Healthy competition is when we get inspiration from the other example. Right. If you are inspired by somebody who is going forward, it's always better. You see, you must learn from others, and you must take inspiration from others' lives. Oh, he has achieved, she has gone to Mount Everest with 1 lakh. At least I
Yeah.
can go to with Mount Everest with 2 lakhs. If
Yeah.
Arunima Sinha can go with 1 lakh to Mount Everest,
Yeah.
I can go to Mount Everest with 2 lakhs. That type of inspiration, if you derive, that's good. That's very good. But Arunima Sinha went with 1 lakh, and I am not able to go, so I must pull her leg. That is negative
Yes.
jealousy.
Okay. Yes, I get it. I get your point. Um, so going forward, like we have talked a lot about bondages and about working for our liberation, working for others' liberation, and working in combination of both. Taking this forward, I want to ask: is it okay to have expectations from others? And if you say that you have self faith and self belief, and it is not okay to expect from others, then how far is it okay to fulfill other people's expectations? So the question is both way. If I cannot expect, then how can somebody expect from me?
Yes, very true. Very good question. First of all, always remember, expectation will always bring misery. Always. When you expect somebody to do something and it doesn't happen, you feel misery. You feel frustrated and you feel dragged out, completely dried out. So that is why Bhagavad Gita says, Karmani vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karmphal heturbu mate sangosto karmani. Do your best, but leave the rest to God. Leave the rest to the reality. Do your best. Your prerogative is to do work in the best possible manner. Do it. Now, accept whatever comes. Try to do the best. Try to expect the best. Be prepared for the worst. That is the mental attitude that will save you. So similarly, now we are talking about in the same way, when we are talking about expectation from others,
Yeah.
do not expect from others. If you expect a particular type of reaction from the others, and if you don't get it, then you will feel. So as I told you, expectation will always bring misery. So never expect. Do your best and leave the rest. Now you are talking about is that when others expect from me something, whether I should do or not, you try to do again your best and leave the rest. You will never be able to you will be never be able to satisfy the others. Your whole life will go, but you will not be able to satisfy others because there is unlimited expectation in everybody. So, but whatever you feel comfortable, you try to do your best possible way. We should always see about others' comfort. We should always try to make others comfortable, and even without their expectation, we will try to be of service to others. But at the same time, we must understand that it is not possible to please all the people. We must understand that. If we go on trying to be pleasant to everybody, then you will have to move away from your principles, from your center of gravity. Maintain your center of gravity, maintain your dignity, maintain your this equal-mindedness. At the same time, try to be of service to others as much as possible.
Yeah. Swamiji, before this, you were mentioning something about expectations in relationships. Can you tell a little bit more on that? Because here we are talking about, we cannot satisfy everybody, but that one person, is it necessary that I mean, of course, we would, when some person is in a partnership, you need to satisfy each other's expectations. But then, how far can one go? I mean, this is a very subjective question. But then you were saying something. If you could just elaborate a little
As I
more.
told you, if you analyze what happens is that uh, in I was just comparing that. You see what happens when it is arranged marriage. It is understood you will have to do a lot of adjustment. You don't know the other person. Suddenly your parents have decided because he's from the same community, this or that. So both husband and wife, they know that we will have to make a lot of adjustments. They are not expecting the ideal situation. They are ready for that. I will have to make a lot of adjustment. I know it. So that is why the expectation being at the low stage, when it is not fulfilled, it does not give you misery because you are already prepared to meet with that adversity or that eventuality. But in love marriage, what happens? You want 100% expectation fulfilled in the other person. And in the beginning, because of the romance and all that, you just try to you just come across the only goodness of others.
Mm.
And then gradually you find out, no, the other defects are also there, and then try to see more and more defects. So that because the expectation level too much, you expected कि मेरी पत्नी एकदम चंद्रमुखी रहेगी, तो कई एक आदमी ने कहा मैंने शादी किया उसके पहले तो चंद्रमुखी थी, शादी के बाद वो सूर्यमुखी हो गई और अभी तो ज्वालामुखी हो गई, मैं कैसे घर में रहूं? पहले उसको लगता था वो चंद्रमुखी है, फिर बाद में लगा सूर्यमुखी है, बाद में अभी ज्वालामुखी है. तो एक्सपेक्टेशन के कारण ये हो रहा है. दिस इज बिकॉज ऑफ एक्सपेक्टेशन. He was expecting that that girl will always be Chandramukhi.
Yeah.
She has also got her own, she must be angry because maybe you are drunkard or maybe you got some gambling or something like that. So she has become Surimukhi. She might have got her own point. But we are not now discussing about the justification of being Suryamukhi or not Suryamukhi or being drunkard, this, that. No. What I'm saying is the principle is this, that the more the expectation, more will be the misery when the expectations are not fulfilled.
Right.
So let us try to be practical in our life. We will have to make a lot of adjustments. So one girl told me that I am not getting proper husband. I said the type of husband that you want is not yet born. How will you get it? And she was very much perturbed. What? Why God? I said, he's not yet born because you have got 1 million qualities. And they are all they are not complementary qualities. They are opposite qualities. You want the person to be an achiever, at the same time you want that he should be a yes man to you.
Yeah.
When you write down all the qualities, write down. I tell, first of all, you write down what are the qualities you are looking for in your husband. Then she writes down, and I show her. You see, these are all not complementary. They're opposite. All these opposite qualities वाला ऐसा आदमी तुमको जन्म ही नहीं लिया तो मिलेगा कैसे? If at all he is born, he will not select you because he has also got another list of 1,000 qualities.
Right.
So we must remember, life is a compromise. Life is an adjustment. There is never an ideal husband. There is never an ideal wife. There is never an ideal child. There is never an ideal parent. We are all human beings full of defects, but trying to go towards perfection in our own way. And in the process, we are meeting a lot of errors. Let us try to work out those errors, and let us try to be a little more liberal in forgiving the errors of others. At the same time, try to become more and more perfect.
That's a beautiful answer, Swamiji. And Swamiji, as we're coming towards the end of this podcast recording, I want to ask you, is there an act of kindness that you have experienced which you can never forget?
You see, normally we avoid the personal questions, or we talking about our personal things. Being monks, we try to avoid that. But anyway, I will give you a reply in an indirect way, which you will understand. You see, Swami Vivekananda says in his book on Karma Yoga that the kindness of giving food is very nice. The charity of giving food. Food means all. Food, clothes, material things is good. That is the first category. Better still is to give education, knowledge. Because as they say, rather than giving a fish, giving a fishing rod and the knowledge how to do fishing, so he will become self-dependent.
Yes.
So one is to dole out the food and clothes and all that. Second important thing is to give training on self-employment and in some trade and skill-oriented training, so that he becomes self-employed or employed. That is still better type of charity, better type of kindness. Third, still better, is to give spiritual knowledge, because then you get infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite existence. You come to know of your true nature, and all the miseries end once for all for you.
Yes.
Misery is caused by ignorance, by nothing else. Misery is caused by ignorance. And so the person who removes, who imparts you spiritual knowledge so that you can remove your ignorance, that is the best type of kindness, the best type of charity, the best type of help, the best type of kindness, the highest kindness. And that is what I experienced in my life. I received spiritual initiation from Swami Vireshwaranand Maharaj, the 10th president of Ramakrishna Mission, who was a disciple of Holy Mother. And I think in my life that was the greatest kindness that I experienced. And for every person, if he or she has received spiritual initiation, that is the highest kindness. Of course, there are so many other kindnesses that you might have experienced in your life. Somebody giving you lift at the right moment, somebody saving you even from your accident and all that. They are no doubt very great help. But of course, the highest kindness, the greatest kindness, the best kindness is when you get infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite happiness, infinite life.
Swamiji, what is your prayer for the world?
Yeah, we always pray. Swami Vivekananda says in his book, Raj Yoga, that at long last you will understand that the best way to become happy is to see that others are happy. And the best way to get peace of mind is to pray for others' peace of mind. And so he used to advocate, before you start your spiritual practices, you must recite a prayer. This is a prayer which is being recited by millions of people from thousands of years in our country. What is the prayer? Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kashid dukha bhag bhavet. Let all be happy, let all be healthy, let all attain goodness, let none get misery. Peace, peace, peace. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. This is our prayer. Every day we do prayer, for many times we do, and we ever advocate everybody. And Swami Vivekananda says, if all the people start praying like this, within a minute, the world will be changed, completely revolutionized.
Yes.
Because it is the vibrations, it is the waves of peace, the waves coming out from these thoughts. The thoughts waves are very, very important. So such thoughts coming out will give you peace, will give others peace. So I want that all be happy. That's all that I want. That is my prayer.
That is so wonderful, Swamiji. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, this podcast it seems that it is so precious to me now that I'm going to see it on a repeat mode over and over again, because there is still a lot. I would confess there is a lot which I would have to sit and process in my mind. I would have to sit and understand it in depth to implement it further. But again, I would say that this is really very valuable, and you've been very, very kind and very generous. This is probably the act of kindness that I have experienced, that you gave so much of your time in giving your peace of mind, and giving in sharing this knowledge of spirituality, and clearing out so many doubts. And I'm sure there are going to be many more doubts when I listen to this recording again. But of course, that is how we will evolve. And if you permit, I would definitely get back with my questions to you again.
Sure, sure. I will be very happy. There is my YouTube channel with my name, in which more than 1,000 videos are already available. You can go through them. That will be giving you a much better background, because this was a short time, but there you get hundreds and hundreds of videos on the topics that you just now were raising questions. There are videos on that with all details. So you can go through that, go through the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, and go through a book, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. beautiful book. And there are many small books are there, Happiness and Peace in Everyday Life, Nurturing Relationship, where I have dealt with these questions. I have written that book with a very pragmatic way, and they are based on my lectures that I delivered at Ahmedabad Management Association.
Okay.
Then they brought out the book, and this is how the book has come out. It is just a summary of the lecture that I gave. The lecture is also available on YouTube. But I always want to be very pragmatic rather than going for the theoretical. At present, what are the problems being faced by you all, by we all, and I try to trace it in that way. So we will always in touch. I am so happy to be reunited with you after so many years. It's many years before we met, and I was very happy to meet you now, but virtually. When you come to Rajkot, we will meet actually, or when I
Certainly.
go to Vadodara, we'll meet actually. That will be still more happiness. But I'm really very happy, and your questions were very intelligent, and your concepts are very clear, and I also enjoyed talking with you. So I am thankful to you, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Swamiji. Thank you.